Yeah, exactly.
Hi guys. So as you know, like me and Tom are local coordinators. I'm a coordinator for St Helens, and Tom covers the Holton area. Your role is a bit more, what's the word? A little bit more specialised and
Niche.
niche, specialised, whatever way you want to look at it, is different to our role. So do you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah. I'm a coordinator for Dad Matters. I still stand with the same core values that Dad Matters has: attachment and bonding, mental health, access and services. But my work is predominantly funded by the NHS Perinatal Trauma and Loss Service. So I support dads that have experienced traumatic birth or death of a baby under two, through miscarriage, stillbirth, or SIDS, or any other sort of reasons that can happen. Yeah, I've been doing it about over 3 years now. I work with over 100 dads that have lost their baby, and yeah, I love it. It's the best job I've ever had. It's hard. It can be really challenging at times, but I've worked out my own little tools to get me by.
Oh, that's good.
Um,
That's good. And I
yeah,
know, obviously, you've just said you love the job, and I think a lot of people listening will be a bit like, "Well, how can you love that job?" I do. So I do Rainbow Clinic at Western Hospital on a Friday morning, which is for parents who are pregnant after experiencing baby loss.
yeah,
Um, I love it as well, to be honest with you. It's something I went through with my ex-partner. We had two second trimester miscarriages in very quick succession, and there was nothing at the time. There was nothing there for me at all. I remember everybody asking me, "So how's mum? How's mum?" At the time, we also had we had another son who was 2 and 3. Two on the first, lost 3 on the second, and it was, how's mum, how's James, how's mum, how's James, and nobody actually asked me how I was feeling. um I didn't talk about how I was feeling, and I think being there on Rainbow Clinic and being able to share my experience and share what I went through with parents who were going through what we went through, I think it's very rewarding. Don't get me wrong, it's emotional. I've actually sat with parents and explained to parents, listen, feel free to cry, just don't be offended if I cry with you. Which, for me, I don't know whether that's the right approach or not, but it's my approach. So we'd, as I say, we already had a boy, and my wife got pregnant. So sorry, yeah. So we had a boy. My wife got pregnant. We'd got past the 12 weeks. We'd sat my son down. We told him he was going to be a big brother. Obviously, we told the family. We told everyone else. And we got to 21 weeks. I came home from work, and my wife said, "I don't feel right." And I think literally within an hour or so, we'd lost our son. We went through the process. We had a funeral, and within 4 weeks, my wife was pregnant again. A little bit more cautious this time, and then obviously second trimester again. Same thing happened. Came home from work. My wife said, "That's the same man. I don't feel right." And again, within an hour or so, we'd lost another little boy. Um, then, thankfully, 6 weeks later, my wife got pregnant again, and the support from the hospital was fantastic. My ex-wife's a doctor, so there was, I'm assuming there was a bit of professional courtesy there, because they couldn't have treated us any better than what they did. My wife had a stitch in her cervix just in case. That's what the issue was. And then it was a case of obviously waiting 9 months. So the plan was a planned C-section 2 weeks before she was due, which all went according to plan, thankfully. But for me, it was really difficult because I never got to a point where I thought, right, I can relax now. It were like a lot of pregnancies. I know some people get to 12 weeks and they're a little bit calmer. I literally never got that. I didn't hate being home. I hated coming home. I hated walking through the door from work, and every time I walked through the door from work, I just dreaded that line. I don't feel right. I know now, looking back in hindsight, I should have spoke. I should have spoke about how I was feeling. I probably told my wife how I was feeling because I never did, and I take full responsibility for that. I really wish somebody would have asked me, how are you feeling? And I could have offloaded, but as it was, I never. And I think, obviously, as I say, for them 9 months to 38 weeks, I was constantly on edge, constantly on with the adrenaline pumping, and just dreading the worst, really. And I remember when my daughter came along, and my wife was fine, and my daughter was fine, and I could finally relax, and the adrenaline wore off, and I felt exhausted, physically, emotionally drained, and I was obviously looking at the situation, and because it had only been like 4 weeks and 6 weeks in between the pregnancies, my wife had been pregnant for nearly 2 years. I couldn't turn to her and say to her, I'm exhausted, because what, in my mind, what I was going through and what I'd been through paled in significance to what she'd been through, both physically and emotionally. And I think, yeah, I just think I didn't want to accept, and it took me, I think it was at least a good week, 10 days before I was over that exhaustion and over that, like, just being physically drained. And it's hard to explain. And obviously, we've got Charlotte now, and I wouldn't change our Charlotte for the world. We wouldn't have had our Charlotte if we wouldn't have lost the boys. And I get that, and it kind of makes me feel more at ease, I suppose, because I wouldn't swap our Charlotte. But I say, like, when me and my partner, we lost our children in the second trimester. These people who go through and have stillborns and actually you lose children as well, I can't imagine what they go through. And I think for you to be dealing with them and consoling them and knowing how to do it and how to approach it, I think it's absolutely amazing what you do. For me, I think I'd have liked somebody to just say to me, listen, lad, I know what you've been through. I know what you've been through. I can't imagine what you're feeling like. I'm here if you want to talk about it. Not necessarily have that conversation, but just acknowledge what had gone on, what we've been through, and giving me that choice, even rather, because I was never asked. I don't know how I'd react. If you asked me now how I would have reacted at the time, I don't know. I know if my wife would have asked me, I would have been, I'm fine. I need to be strong for you. I need to be strong for the kids. If one of my friends would have asked me, I don't know. I think if somebody like ourselves, like what we do, somebody who could have offloaded to, then just close the box, put the box to one side and move forward, I think I probably would have opened up to them. Is about as close to an honest answer as I can give, really.
It's difficult because, I mean, everyone comes at it from a different perspective. Everyone comes to me in a different place, on a different path, and everyone's story is similar. They've lost a baby or they've had a traumatic birth. They're dealing with it. They're all dealing with it differently. And I've had cases where I've had 2 cases at the same time that are so closely similar, but both ends of a perspective how they're dealing with it. One guy's just like, I've lost my baby. I am grieving. It hurts, and I'm just going through not going through the motions, but I'm just transitioning through that period. And then the other guy will spend every phone call for 6 weeks with me bawling his eyes out. And I was in supervision a couple of weeks ago and we were talking about it, and it's like how the Dad Matters core values of helping dads bond with their baby and everything that comes with that. There's always that not sort of relatively clear end goal. I can't bond with my baby. How do I do it? Well, you can do these things, do skin to skin, communicate with your baby, understand that crying isn't a personal attack and all those things. And as long as they can bond with their baby, then the end goal is achieved. But grief's never going to go away. So my end goal is ridiculously grey. Because it's like, how many dads say, I just want to be a good enough dad? Okay, that's fair. That's what we all think. But what is good enough in your mental health and well-being to have processed grief to a point that you can be okay? I don't know that. I don't know what the answer is. So I kind of have to make this really weird judgment on it with, I guess using the mental health core, the mental health scores that we have, seeing if there's an improvement there, just seeing how in the way they're presenting on each phone call, is there a sign that there's an improvement? Are they able to talk about things more clearly? Have they got more support around them? I just have to make a judgment on where they are in that journey, and that's probably the hardest part for me.
Yeah. And I guess it's really difficult to start conversations as well. I mean, obviously, I've not been through anything like that, but from a coordinator's point of view, who hasn't been through something like that, one-to-ones might last, an hour and a half, or something like that. It's the dads that I've worked with who have had a previous loss. I find it quite difficult to turn what they're talking about into a conversation, into a kind of, it's one of those things where, as you were saying, if you've got a dad who wants to do bonding and attachment, or has got mental health issues, and you can be like, right, well, there's practical steps that you can put in place. Whereas with this, it's just a terrible situation from which, there's nothing that I can say which will make you, better. It won't take it away. No. So it's very, very difficult to turn it into a conversation. And I guess I'd kind of be curious, maybe from Jay, from your point of view, what would you have liked to have heard from someone in that moment? Even if it was a friend or your partner or someone like us, if you were there telling your story, what would you have liked to have heard in that moment? I guess
I don't know, is the honest. I think for me, with any grief, whether it be obviously the loss of a child is, for me, the most horrific grief I think anybody can go through. But obviously people close to the parents, the partners, the siblings, and people go through grief, and I don't think it's a competition over which grief is worse. And as Wes says, everybody reacts to grief differently. Everyone reacts to stresses differently. And I think for me, you can't tell somebody how they feel. You can tell somebody how they can bond with a child. You can tell somebody the best way to release oxytocin. You can give them techniques, and you can tell. But again, it's the same when we're teaching the bonding. These are ways to do it. Whatever way that works for you best is the way that you should do it, because you're different to anybody else, and your child's different to any other child. I think for me, a big part of what I felt and what I went through would have just been somebody listening. I don't think I would have needed them to tell me anything. I think you can't. What can you? There's very little you can tell somebody that's going through what they're going through. For me, I can talk about my personal experience. I can talk about how I felt, and I think more than anything, that just allows people to think about how they felt. But you mightn't have lost a child yourself, but I'm sure at some point in your life you've experienced grief of some kind, and it's all the same feelings. It's still a loss. It's still upsetting, and I think just relating grief to grief is something that anybody can do. But the biggest thing you can do is just give them that ear, give them that time. And as I say, even if it's just a case of, I'm here, I will listen if you want to talk about that. If you want to talk about something totally different and you just want a bit of company, I'm fine with that too. And if somebody's ready to talk about it, they will. If somebody's not, then they won't. But knowing that there's somebody there who will listen, I think makes a massive difference. And again, like, I think it's reading the situation, and as Wes, as you say, like, it's getting that gauge of when you think someone's right, but then it could be somebody's right in their own place 2 weeks before the anniversary, and then the anniversary comes along and kicks it off again. And I think for me, my biggest clarity moment, my biggest moving forward moment was when my daughter was born. And it was like, well, I couldn't have my daughter if we wouldn't have lost the boys. And like, not that, well, it did. I'm going to say not that it made it feel better, because it did make it feel better. I'm not going to lie, I felt better after that. And I think it was, it's the why's it happened, and like, what have we done wrong? And now I know my ex-wife, I know she couldn't have done anything better. She never drank caffeine. She never drank any alcohol. She done everything you name on the second. My ex-wife could not have done anything better than what she did. What happened, and there was no reason for it other than just bad luck. But you still question, well, why has it happened to us and everything? And I think, for me, because there was no answer, I think Charlotte then gave us an answer. Well, actually, this is why it's happened, because we were destined to have Charlotte, and we were destined to have that relationship with Charlotte, and we were destined to have this beautiful young girl who I'm sure is going to come bursting through the door at any point, because she's on her way home from dance at the moment. But yeah, I think it's more just about the listening, Tom, than anything you can say to anyone from a personal perspective. Again, everyone is different, but that's how it felt for me, I think.
What you said there, Jay, it's interesting, and you'll have noticed I smiled. But that thing that you wouldn't have met Charlotte if you hadn't have had the 2 losses.
Yeah.
And I've heard that a handful of times, where we've got this baby, we've got our rainbow baby, and we wouldn't have this if we hadn't have gone through that. I would never say that in the moment. It's like saying, that someone's bawling their eyes out to me. It's like, it's okay, because you've gone through this to get to that bit. I just wouldn't say that. But you get it when you're at your point.
Yeah, well, I agree with you totally. Obviously, the last thing you need to say to somebody is at least you've got this, or at least. God, yeah. I mean, it's not what you want to say. No. For me, I think I'm talking about my own personal experience. I feel comfortable saying that about my experience. It's not something I would project onto somebody else, because, as I said, everyone feels different, and I think maybe more so I can talk about it from my perspective and explain that's how I felt. Whereas I don't think, if you've been through it yourself, I don't think you could say to somebody, but you wouldn't have this baby if it weren't for that. Because it's what consoles me, Wes, and I'm sure that, I'll be honest with you, me and my ex-wife don't speak very much, but I'm sure she'd say the same thing. Do you know what I mean? It's the most horrific ordeal any parent can go through. Yeah. But then at the same time, that rainbow baby is just so special. Don't get me wrong, she's no special than any of the other kids, but it's the relief and the, as I say, it's almost like closure and an explanation for why you went through what you went through.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I'm articulating that very well or not, but it's just, as I say, it's just how I felt at the time.
Yeah.
There was something else you said about. Sorry, Tom, go on.
No, you go ahead.
There was something else you said about how. No, Tom, you go. I've forgotten.
It's all good. It's interesting as well is when you get dads who sort of refer in with a rainbow baby as they've referred in for, you know, they didn't access any support while they were going through what they were going through, but now that they've had the other one and they're struggling with it, one thing which I've noticed with a couple of my dads is the guilt that they feel for struggling and for you know, having a bad time with the baby that they have got. And it's something where, you know, it's like I should be really, really thankful and really grateful to have this baby, but I'm struggling with bonding, or, you know, they won't get put down, or, you know, I'm just not, I'm not feeling that that sort of love with this baby that I should be immensely grateful for having. And, you know, it's something that I probably never really considered, to be fair. And obviously we hadn't had that experience, but from my own perspective with the birth trauma side of things, we had a struggle with our little one when he was little, you know, with reflux and things like that, and after a NICU journey. And I had the same kind of thoughts thinking about it. I was thinking I should be really grateful to have this baby because we've had such a good outcome, but I'm struggling and I'm not having a good time, and it's not what it was painted to be. And, you know, it's just interesting to, you know, I don't think I'd really considered that some dads would be feeling guilt for it, you know.
But have you thought about why though, Tom? I mean, I done, like, I went through a phase of my life, and I won't bore you with all the details, but I had quite a few setbacks, one quite quickly after the other. Now, my way of dealing with that was to put up emotional walls. Basically, it was, you know, you either put it all to the back of your head, lock it in, and deal with it as best you can, or you get it out and you let it all spill out, and you do that in a healthy way through talking to other people, through seeking counselling, or you can do it through an unhealthy way. You can get over-reliance on substances, you can get over-reliance on bad habits, whether it be gambling, just an escape. For me, my big thing was I just put walls up. I didn't want to be as upset as what it was. I didn't want to feel as bad as what I felt, and I didn't want to deal with the emotions I was feeling. So I think if you get yourself in that position, and it's emotional numbing, that is I think is the technical term for it. But if you're emotionally numb because you don't want to feel that pain, that numbness affects all your emotions. So whether it be joy, love, happiness, laughter, the highs aren't as high, but so the lows aren't as low. And unfortunately, you can't have one or the other. If you're switching your emotions off so you don't feel as low as what you could be feeling or what you was feeling, then you're not going to get them highs. And again, if you're protecting yourself from the feelings of loss and from hurt and from dealing with everything that you should be dealing with, because you've lost somebody, so in some cases you might have met the baby, in other cases you might never have met the baby, and not the, so it almost seemed a bit foreign, like grieving somebody that you've never met, but obviously you've still got that emotional connection there. And when you switch them feelings off, then it's very difficult to just switch them back on when you need them. So to make that emotional connection with your new child, and to make that bond, and to get that oxytocin release and suppress the cortisol and everything else that needs to go on in your brain, if you're still suppressing emotions from other parts of what you're going through and what you've been through, you're not going to feel them same highs, you're not going to get them same oxytocin releases. And I think sometimes that's why it comes to a head when the new baby comes along, because that then needs to process actually this is what I've been through. I need to address that. I need to process that so I can move forward with my new child.
It's like a trauma response, isn't it? It's a similar sort of thing to, it's quite common for mums milk not to come in if they've had a particularly traumatic birth, for example. That's quite a common physiological sign. But obviously, with dads not having that sort of physiological aspect, I guess the trauma response is, and when you mentioned when you were telling your story about the why has this happened, I've never really been. I've always been a very, very practical person. If something happens that's beyond my control, I never really think about the why because it's nothing that I've done. But when it comes to things like loss and birth trauma and struggling with your newborn and things like that, after something like that happens, then your brain does start asking the whys. Why has this happened? And it's very difficult, I guess, to try and talk someone down from when they're trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense. If that makes if that
Yeah, of course.
true.
I think a lot of it's personality as well. So in a former life, I was an accountant, and when I'm on like special care, and obviously people are going through what they're going through, they've experienced birth trauma, or the baby's been rushed to special care for other reasons, whatever it be. I've met a couple of engineers on special care, and engineers, accountants, anybody who deals with numbers seems to have the same approach. They want an answer for anything. So why is this? So like a bridge needs to stand, so let's work out the math for it. Again, with accountancy, if X is coming in, then only X can go out, and
there's a right and a wrong answer,
and the logic to numbers and the logic to maths, for me, I find very, as sad as it sounds, I find it very soothing because there's an answer. I don't like indifference. I don't like questions where there's not an answer, if that makes sense. Even if it's, well, this is my answer and this is why, and somebody else could argue, well, I argue the opposite and this is why. I need that and this is why to go with it, if that makes sense. And I think you will get some people whose minds just need that and this is why. And it's the same with, like, obviously when I went back to education, and I'd done a law degree, which was a lot more weirder orientated, and some of the things I had to argue in papers I didn't necessarily agree with, but the fact that I could say, well, this is why I'm saying it, and I could give the evidence to support that, it kind of made it better in my mind because I had that, and this is why.
Yeah, and I guess that would be a good thing to look at. I don't know. Obviously, Wes is enjoying his dinner right now, but if you know anything around when I've spoken to dads and other services, especially like specialist perinatal mental health, is the benefit of debriefs when it comes to the why and the what happened. Even though for a lot of parents they're just going over things that they already know happened, but to see a timeline of this is what happened when, and this is where you went, and this is who you spoke to, it just having that sort of timeline and the ability to review something like that, I can imagine it being quite, cathartic to people, I guess.
Yeah, there was one example last year. I was working with this guy. I think it was probably the second phone call. When we got the report, that was all going, it was all fine. And he just went to me, "Oh, by the way, you can't go anywhere until we've had the debrief." I was like, "Okay, that's fine. When's the debrief?" Thinking he was going to say like 2 years or something. And he went, I think we had that conversation in July, and the debrief was going to be November. And I was like, "Right, that's okay. That's fine. We'll just do that." So we had a load of conversations. They had a traumatic birth. They hadn't lost the baby or anything. It was the baby was healthy. Yeah, there's some other aspects to like the way the feelings he was having to bonding with the baby. It was a little bit more disjointed. But we worked through all that. And when we got to November, he went, we're having the debrief next week. Just thought I'd remind you. I was like, yeah, fair enough. That's okay. When I spoke to him 2 weeks later after the debrief, he went, I said, so how did that go? And he went, oh, it was nothing we didn't know. I just needed to hear them say it. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
What do I do with that?
It's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, and it's interesting when it usually goes one way or the other, doesn't it? It's usually like, on the debrief and I didn't realise that X, Y, and Z happened for whatever reason. It might have been that mum was unconscious at the time, or dad was out of the room looking after baby in special care, or something like that.
Yeah.
Or it could be, oh yeah, I knew what everything was going on. It was just nice to hear, and I guess that's something that can be quite beneficial to a lot. And it's a lot more commonplace now. It wasn't really a thing even a few years ago when we were never sort of offered it as a solution. But thinking back, it might have been something that would have been beneficial from our standpoint.
Well, yeah, that's it. And I think, again, as I say, I don't know 100%, but even with, as I say, with our Charl and the cervical stitch, now, obviously, that was a successful pregnancy, and I personally believe that was why it was successful, because of that stitch. I think obviously we'd had a traumatic birth with James, and maybe I don't know the ins and outs of it, obviously, but I think maybe that caused a weaker cervix, and obviously that stitch was just what we need, and something as simple as a stitch. And again, I wouldn't know the process of how they put the stitch in and what the stitch does. I know obviously my wife went to hospital for it, but she had it, and for me, I think that would. So if we would have went into another pregnancy after Charlotte, I think the knowledge of having that stitch would have made me feel a hell of a lot better.
Yeah,
I think I would have been more relaxed, like the first and the second, rather than the way I was when she was pregnant with Charlotte, if that makes sense. And because he was, again, I'm not saying 100% that was why, but in my head, that was why we were successful.
Yeah, a safety net, like an emotional safety net, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that would have made me feel a lot more relaxed if we would have went through it again, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And again, nobody, it's not, I think, it's not I can have that theory in my head, but I think it'd be nailed on even more if a doctor said to me, yeah, we know that's why, and that's, and do you get what I mean? I think just the reassurance of somebody who's far more knowledgeable than what I am, and far more experienced than what I am, telling me, well, yes, that's right, or that's what we're going to do, and this is why, and hopefully everything will be okay this time. I think it does. I think it's almost like it's somebody senior to yourself, not in terms of who they are as a person, just in terms of their knowledge and experience.
Yeah,
well, they wouldn't want to admit that, because the next person will go, well, it worked for them, why doesn't it work for us?
Yeah, it must be difficult as well when you get someone who's had a loss who then goes to try for another one. I know that obviously your wife, your ex-partner, fell pregnant quite soon after the others, which it must have been a difficult time. And obviously, with it being in your head, it's very, very fresh in your head what's just happened, and then it will potentially happen again. I mean, we're 3 years on from a traumatic birth, and the thought of having another one hasn't even entered my mind, because I couldn't even put up with the stress and the risk of it happening again, let alone it actually physically happening again. So it must be really, really tough to even have it go through your mind about having rainbow baby.
Well, yeah, I get what you're saying, but I mean, for us, it was quick succession. Whether it was too quick is obviously debatable. But in the same breath, now there was a family I was supporting on Rainbow Clinic at Whiston. They've had a baby. The baby's fine, so it's really cool. But they experienced stillborn 11 years ago. They then experienced complications with getting pregnant. They went through the IVF process, and then it took them 11 years to get pregnant. Well, 10 years, I'm assuming 10 and a half years, because it was 11 years when the baby was born. And for me, I can't imagine, I can't begin to imagine the stress they were under after already experiencing that loss, and then going so long and obviously actively trying to have another child. And like, I don't know whether you've seen the statistics on IVF, but I think it's 50% of people going through the IVF process have reported having suicidal thoughts. There's that much pressure on it, and the routine, the hormones, and everything else that goes with it, plus obviously the pressure of it failing, and you only get so many trials off the NHS, and there's only so many. A lot of clinics, even if you're paying privately, they'll only try, because they don't want their failure rate to drop, so they'll only give you 2 or 3 tries. And for me, I think obviously it was quick for us, but I think for me it probably would have been a lot easier. The 9 months of the pregnancy would have been a hell of a lot easier than what they went through, because I just couldn't imagine the pressure they'd put on themselves after 11 years.
I was working with the family at the end of last year, and they'd gone, I think it was, they'd gone through 7 rounds of IVF. And bless him, the guy showed me this video he'd put on social media. It was absolutely heartbreaking, this video of like their journey. And at the beginning of the video, it was like their wedding day. They were all sunshine and daisies. Everything was great. They looked fantastic. And when I was working with them, they just looked absolutely shattered. I was like, my heart went out to them, because I was like, you've been through the mill a lot of times. And struggled with all those processes of going through the IVF treatment, of losing those babies, and now this pregnancy, and it was heartbreaking. And it was over Christmas, and that difficulty of the work that I do and the kind of person I am, that stayed with me all over Christmas. I enjoyed Christmas and it was fine, but I was just constantly thinking, I wonder if they're okay. I wonder if they're okay. And I get to the new year and I switch my work phone on, and there's a text from Dad with a picture of the baby, and I'm like, get in. And like, met the baby, met the family, and you know, it's such a beautiful moment when that happens. And I think some people would say that could be why I enjoy it, because you know, it's the rough with the smooth. But it's not even that. You know, it's beautiful when that sort of stuff happens. When I'm working with a dad that's they're expecting a rainbow baby, and it all goes well. But I shared on my personal, not personal, I'm not on personal Facebook, on my work Facebook the other day. Whenever Kieran, our boss, shares something that's like quite profound for the work we do and for me as well. I think it was statistics. Well, yeah, that's it. We're 8 years old, aren't we now? We're 8 years old, and he shared like statistics from those 8 years. And I just shared it, and I just put, I bloody love my job. And part of it was I genuinely feel privileged to work alongside these dads, because knowing that, like you said, Jay, these dads haven't got or haven't had anywhere else to put their emotions and thoughts, whether verbally or anywhere else. So for me to come into their lives, and my first question is, what's happening for you right now? And for them to have that moment to talk about their story, that's ultimate privilege, because they're in the darkest time in their life and they're sharing that moment with me. And it's heartbreaking a lot of the time.
That's it. And I think for me, I love the fact I can be that person who says to the dad, that parent, because nobody said to me, how are you? I love the fact that I can be that person that says, how are you? But touching on what you've just said there, Wes, for a man to open up, men just don't open up. They don't open their emotions. They don't talk about their emotions very easily. And I know I'm stereotyping here and generalising. I'm talking about the majority of men that I deal with every day, and I'm sure the same as yourselves. And for other men to put their trust in us to talk about their deepest feelings and their darkest emotion and everything they're going through, it is a privilege. You're right, 100%. And I think even just walking away and thinking to yourself, well, I've took that dad down from 100% stress to 90%, and just being able to relieve a little bit of that pressure, for me, that's a job well done. If we get it down to 60, 50, 40, then obviously they're the ones where, like, as you say, where you're like, yes, gets in. This is a great day. Do you know what I mean?
I had a day in St Mary's Rainbow Clinic at Oxford Road once.
Sure.
And at the moment, as will become apparent as I explain what happened, at the time I was like mortified that this thing had happened. But when I spoke to Kieran afterwards, he was like, "It's okay," and explained it to me. But basically, I was working with a dad who I met, who I was having a meeting with there. So I went out into the corridor with him. I was chatting away with him, and he broke down. He started getting really upset. So we sort of contained that and worked through that. He got going for his appointment with his missus, so they went off. I went back into the waiting room. There was 2 couples in there. I went over to one of them and I said the usual stuff, introduce myself, Dad Matters, explain my role. And I just went, and how are things with you guys? How far along are you and stuff? And Mum burst into tears. Hadn't said anything. She burst into tears. I was like, okay. Dad put his hand on her knee. He started crying. I was like, right, I'll go and get you some tissues. Went to reception, come back with the tissues. They sort of got it out, just sort of briefly chatted about the situation. She was like apologetic and everything. Sat with them for about 5 minutes, and after that I stood up and the couple behind were crying because they were crying. So I was like jokingly saying, I've made 5 people cry in 10 minutes. What the hell's happening? And Kieran just said, but they have not had an opportunity to do that. I know I said Mum was crying, but the fact Dad was crying too, and giving those guys that space, that opportunity to just go, it's okay. Why wouldn't you cry?
Yeah, well, that's it. That's it. Now, as I said at the very beginning, like literally, I've went into couples and said to them, feel free to cry, but just don't be offended if I cry with you, because as much as obviously when I'm at work, I've got my professional head on, I'm still human. I know what I felt and I know what I went through, and for me to be emotionally vulnerable, it's not what they need. I don't think it's not what I would have needed at the time. I would have needed genuine empathy, somebody who got that I was hurting, somebody that got that I was upset. What's it? Shall, come here. This is our Charles. She's home from dance. Been talking about you.
It's all good stuff, Charles. Don't worry.
It's all about it.
Yeah. So as I say, she's 12 now, going on 21, and yeah. So it's, as I say, that's my journey. Not like complete. You got what I mean?
Fantastic.
And are we sort of coming to the end?
Sorry?
Are we sort of coming to the end?
Yeah, I think so, Wes, yeah.
Okay. So I recently, this year I was invited to London to go to the National Maternal Mental Health Service Summit. They invited me to speak in front of 200 professionals. It was great. But to develop that presentation, I needed research, and I couldn't find any. There was nothing. I'd searched everywhere. And then about 2 months before it, I said to Kieran, I really need to figure something out, because it would be so good to have something there. And he said, I can't find anything either. We've been hashing it out. And about an hour later, he rang me back and he went, I can't believe it. I've been sat on this stuff and I've forgotten about it. During COVID, Liverpool University had got in touch with Dad Matters and said, we need 100 participants to do some research in traumatic birth and the effect it has on dads. they got 350 respondents, and they have all these findings now about traumatic birth in dads and the impact it has. And basically, the cut and dry of it is, what was the quote? Dads feel the same level of warmth as any other dad with a new baby, but they feel that the baby takes up more of their time than it should. So they have kind of a little bit, like you were saying earlier, that guilt, a little bit of resentment, you know, the baby put mum through all that stuff, whatever it is. And then, it was about 2 weeks before the summit, I was at another presentation from Manchester University, who've been doing some research on loss and the impact in dads. And that study was basically what you'd expect, that dads struggle to bond more so with the rainbow baby because they feel, like you said earlier, they feel a level of shame and guilt. The fact they feel like they should love this baby, but they miss the baby that didn't survive. So they've got this kind of juxtaposition of, I feel love here and I'm really happy, but I still feel really sad and disjointed about the baby that wasn't to be. So now they've got this research out there, it's just like, that's really what we're about. It's about knowing that the barriers dads have to bonding with their baby are increased significantly after traumatic birth or a loss. So I know now that any conversation I have with any dad that lost his baby means that his anxiety is going to be somewhat reduced through that conversation, so that when he has his rainbow baby, that bond is going to be a little bit stronger than what it could have been if he hadn't.
It's really valuable.
So I'm just like, it's almost like throwing a big snowball at my face and going, this is you making a difference.
Yeah.
That research is there saying, by doing your job, you are making a significant difference to those people's lives, which we are doing with all of our dads. Absolutely. But for me personally, knowing that it's a significant mental health impact.
Yeah, no, it's especially with the research to back it up. It's great to have in your back pocket.
And I think for me as well, but again, touching, like, following your lead, really, I think that's one of the reasons I enjoy Rainbow. It's the fact that we're talking about these things before the new baby comes along. So, and addressing these things. So for me, I'm a big thing over antenatal education. If we give dads the information before baby comes along, and we're saying, well, listen, if you're struggling to bond with your child, this is why. Don't feel strange about it. Don't feel like it's unusual. It does happen. Obviously, not all the time, but sometimes it does happen. This is why. This is the science behind it, and this is what you can do to combat it. I think giving them that information beforehand obviously helps them deal with it a hell of a lot more. And I think it's the same on Rainbow Clinic. I think giving them that chance to, as you say, that chance to offload, that chance to deal with their emotions a little bit more. It's far easier to do it before baby comes along than to try and address problems once they've occurred, once baby's there.
Yeah. Information before intervention.
Exactly. And again, 100%. 100%. Right, gents, listen, I'll leave you to it. I'm going to go and spend a little bit of time with my girl.